One of the top players in the state of Utah in the class of 2026 just decommitted from Oregon. So now that Utah has a chance to land one of their top in-state talents, can they pull it off? We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen-in view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Nissan. Nissan has an incredible selection for you guys, so make sure you guys head over to check out the 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in today's episode. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Matt Patton of Utah Rivals. We're going to be talking about the Utah defensive line in depth, a little bit on the Utah men's and women's basketball program later too, but absolutely have to start, Matt, with the massive news that Blair Ungolo of 24/7 Sports put out on X that Bott Mulitalo is pulling out of his commitment from Oregon. This is a player who, when the first 2026 class rankings dropped, he was a top 100 player in the state. He's still a top 100 player in the country. He's a top 3 player in the state currently right now. He's an absolute monster. And the fact that he is back open, and Blair listed his teams that are going to be interested in pursuing him: BYU, USC, Washington, and our good old University of Utah Utes. So I am fired up to see if Utah can land one of the best players to come out of the state in a loaded 26 class.
Yeah, it would be great to bring him in. And I was looking through that 26 class and the guys that they're already pursuing. There's a lot of good offensive tackles that they're trying to get. And if they could even land 2 or 3 of these guys, it would be a huge. They need to reload that season, and I love that. And it's interesting to see, him willing to leave a place like the University of Oregon, and somebody got in his ear and said, "Hey, you know what? If you switch over to offensive line, that's going to be your best shot to get to the NFL." He listened, and now the Utes have a chance.
Well, you just hinted at something right there I didn't even bring up. Part of the reason he's making this decision is originally he was a defensive end. He's now going to be an offensive lineman, which I am fascinated by. It's focused. He said that he had originally all his offers as a defensive lineman. So now that he's going to be an offensive lineman, he wants to just see what else is out there, see what the best fit for him is. And it's very interesting because, Matt, you and I were talking before the show. Like, if you look at Oregon's history of offensive linemen, not too shabby. Now, Thankfully, neither is Utah's as of late, especially with what guys like Spencer Fano are doing right now. So with Mulitalo entering the portal again, it's massive for Utah. Like I said, he's a top 100 prospect, 8th ranked offensive tackle in the country. So now this is an offensive tackle, 8th ranked offensive tackle, 6'5", 275 pounds. So, and a tremendous athlete too during his time at Lone Peak, and he can just continues to be a game wrecker on the defensive side of the ball and an elite blind side protector too. 6'5", 275. I absolutely think this is a guy who has the makings of a franchise tackle for a college team and a franchise tackle at the NFL.
The Utes missed on him once. They can't miss again. I mean, this is something that I really feel like he's a guy that got to go get. You've got to get that top in-state talent. Yeah. And, there's a lot of other guys in the 26 class from Utah that are really good. There's a lot of talent in Utah from that 26 class. And, the Utes are doing a good job at landing guys lately. But with somebody like this, yeah, you're right. He could be a franchise player that, could be a game changer, especially with the types of guys they already have on that line.
I mentioned his measurements, 6'5", 275. Those are almost identical to Spencer Fano's when he was coming out too. So that's something, and we already talked about what a tremendous athlete Mulitalo is too. So I think that's incredibly exciting. And Matt, if you told me that Utah could have Bott Mulitalo as the successor to Fano, who I do feel like is gone probably after this year, it feels like that's the direction we're tending in. I feel like Caleb Lomu's might come back. He's an interesting one to me right now, probably. Like, he's really good, but like mid-round NFL pick right now, probably. Yeah. So if he stays, maybe goes even higher. But like, I could absolutely see Bott Mulitalo even following in Fano's footsteps and coming to Utah, being a guy who contributes right away because of that athletic ability. And the fact that he is like already saying, hey, I want to really focus on the offensive side of the ball for my collegiate development and NFL development eventually. I think that bodes very well for his future to show that maturity and say, hey, this is where I'm going to be best utilized at.
Oh yeah, he's got a great opportunity if he comes to Utah. I know that I was reading some of his interviews that he had after decommitting, and it seems like he's pretty high on Washington. But I
Yeah.
just feel like Washington, there's so much there right now that's just it's not stable yet. It hasn't really gotten its footing in the new conference with the new coach. I think his best situation really, if he wanted to make it to the NFL, go to Utah.
I look at places like Washington, USC, Oregon, Big Ten money. It's a
Yep.
lot harder for high recruits to play there early because of the level of recruits that they often get in. The way Utah is able to compete with those programs like that in the past, and I still believe they currently will, is because of how good their player development is. So you pair an elite athlete like Bott Mulitalo with Utah's player development. And the fact that he'll have a chance to start right away because of what a tremendous athletic upside he has, paired with the elite coaching of Jim Harding. This is where also if you're Utah, you got to keep him away from BYU, right, Matt?
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, it's going to become more competitive with BYU because of the success that they're having. And, but the thing is, I think the reason he's leaving Oregon is for that exact reason that you were just talking about, because there is so much more competition from the higher level players. Oregon's bringing in some serious offensive linemen. And so I think that he said, you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else. And so actually that does bode well. And it might come down to BYU and Utah.
Very well could. And we do not want what happened with Hunter Clegg, where he flips over to BYU now. And obviously there's several transfers of Keanu Tanavasa being the key one, who now they're Cougars. If you're Utah, and BYU's had some recent recruiting wins. I think about Austin Pay, the really good offensive lineman they landed. There was the former Timpview offensive tackle. He transferred to Gorman, and now he was like a 4-star. Now he's going to BYU too. So there's been some recent swings. The skill position players are still incredibly important. Quarterback, all of that matter. I still believe, Matt, games are won and lost in the trenches, and Utah needs to make sure they keep the present and future of the trenches well stockpiled with talent.
Absolutely. Without question. They do.
They do. It's a massively important position, and they're doing really well right now. They look poised. We'll talk about this on a future episode, but they look poised to have a pretty good offensive line this year. I do think it's going to be really good. I have questions about the interior offensive line based on how they performed last year. I think the tackle duo of Fano and Lomu could be one of the best for years to come. And the fact that you could potentially have Mulitalo then sliding in there as well. Like we said, NIL could definitely be a factor. I'm not saying like that's what's all important to Bott, but that's where the USCs, the Big Tens, I've talked about this a lot on my show. To me, when Utah lost out to Bott to Oregon, like it's not like, oh, what is Utah doing wrong? It's, Big Ten money versus Big 12 money. Like I don't get mad when that happens, but the fact that he's willing to leave the Big Ten could bode very well for the Utah Utes.
Yes.
And that leaves me incredibly optimistic about the future. And I'm just really fired up to see what this Utah team can do, what this Utah coaching staff can do as they're going to pursue Bott Mulitalo. A lot of really good programs are going to be in the mix too, but you want to be an offensive tackle, look at how good Spencer Fano's done here. Could be a guy who plays 3 years at Utah. Bott Mulitalo has that potential, makes the switch from defensive to offensive line. So, and still has a whole year to go at Lone Peak too, and more another offseason of training development. So sky is the limit for what I believe he can be. But what is the ceiling or sky for the Utah defensive line? I want to preview the Utah defensive line heading into spring ball, talk about some of the key players there who I think are going to be the best guys that we're going to see emerge from that group. We're going to take a deeper dive into the Utah defensive line, Sac Lake City's participants in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Nissan. Nissan has you covered with an incredible selection. When you're talking about Nissan, it's the Armada team of the week that we want to focus in on. It's brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from the top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase their strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut team of the week are the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by the National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC going 19-1, which is just incredible. The Blue Devils were plus 434 in ACC games, the largest differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 53 and 54. for. When it comes to Nissan Armada, they say go further and conquer, and that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com today to look at the Armada and so many other of the great vehicles that Nissan has in their inventory. Matt Patton back with me here. Matt, as we look at and talk about this Utah defensive line, what I want to do is talk about who we think the top four are kind of going to be, defensive tackles, defensive ends included, and then we'll break down the depth of each spot individually. I think the starting four defensive linemen will be, at the time we get to spring, this is going into spring ball, or I'll even just say leaving spring ball, Logan Fano, Aliki Vaimahi, Dallas Vakalaki, and those guys, you look at Fano and Vaimahi, multi-year starters. Vakalaki emerged as a freshman. Loved what I saw from him. Now he has a full offseason into. I think he's going to be a monster. He could be my breakout player candidate of the year, honestly. And then defensive end is a fascinating spot, but I'm going to go with Lance Holtzclaw here, the Washington transfer, as the guy that I think is going to win that job. But that's the one I feel the least sure about. How do you look at the defensive line?
Yeah, I'm aligned with you on all of them. The only one that I'm questioning is the Lance Holtzclaw. He definitely could be, but I just don't know. Got to see what happens in the spring. I actually still really like the idea of Paul Fitzgerald.
I do too.
From a lot of my sources, he was injured pretty much most of the season last year, had nagging stuff going on, not big injuries, but just the nagging stuff that just doesn't let you play at your, 100%. So yeah, you can't forget about, he had that great season at Utah State. I think he could definitely be the guy to beat it out, but I do feel like it could be down to those two guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's incredible and tremendous depth that Utah has. It does feel like the leader of this group is looking like it'll be Logan Fano. I think Logan, a little bit, he was coming back from off the injury, not probably quite the heights we expected him to reach a season ago, still a very good player, but this is a guy, to me, he has the potential to be a 10-plus sack guy. He has the potential to be that. Yeah. Will he be that? Time will tell, but an incredible athlete. I think he's a better pass rusher than run defender right now, but coming back another year, being fully healthy too, having a full offseason to just train instead of rehabbing, I think will make a difference as well too. I'm expecting big things out of Logan Fano. I think that starts with being a leader in the spring.
Yeah, that leadership makes a huge difference, and they needed somebody to step into that role, and I think it seems that he's doing that. It seems like both Fanos on each side of the line, Spencer's taking care of the offense with leadership and Logan on the defense. What I really think with Logan, a lot of guys, when they come off of an ACL type injury, it usually does take about a year. And, so I think it was great that he was able to play last season. But I think another year removed from that knee injury, he should be able to, just like you're saying, have that potential to hit that 10 sack type of a number.
Yeah, Logan is the guy I feel like, okay, he's going to start at defensive end. As for who's going to start opposite to him, man, are there a lot of options. You know what's fascinating about the entire defensive end room, Matt? All of the main contributors should be transfers. Barring a Cash Dillon emergence, the former defensive end out of Quarter Canyon, all of these guys have transferred in. And because a lot of them are transfers, they come in with either some experience or just potential to be really good. I already mentioned that my guy I'm looking at is Lance Holtzclaw to be the starter right now, 6'3", 227-pound defensive end out of Washington. This guy saw not a ton of playing time with the Huskies, but did connect in some opportunities. You already mentioned Paul Fitzgerald, Utah State. Him and the next guy, John Henry Daly, both on the team last year. Henry Daly didn't see much time at BYU, limited time at Utah last year. Paul Fitzgerald played a ton as a freshman as a redshirt freshman at Utah State. And man, he had 9 sacks. He was just incredible with the Aggies too. And we haven't even mentioned Jackson Jones, a former 4-star recruit, a freshman 6'2" defensive end. This is a guy who was last season in high school football, logged 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, he's a monster. He was a 4-star prospect, as we mentioned too. I mean, any of those guys, if you told me they're starting day one, I could see it. And I think it's going to be hard to figure out what the depth looks like. I think Utah, I don't know if the defensive end, the top, will be at what Van Fillinger, Connor O'Toole were, or at least what we expect to be, because O'Toole and Fillinger were hurt often. But the depth here is tremendous, Matt.
The depth has me really excited. And they know how to rotate those guys and find the right guys for the right situations. And I'm glad that you brought up Jackson Jones, because that's a guy that I think a lot of people just have kind of glossed over just because he doesn't have any stats, but you mentioned he had 9 sacks his senior season. He only played 5 games his senior season. He got injured early. I think it was he had 17 sacks, 96 tackles as a junior. So obviously, he was at Oregon. coming off of a season-ending injury from his senior season, so it makes sense why he wasn't playing. Who knows what Utah has there? And I looked that one up too. I didn't realize this, but his father, Daniel Jones, he was the receiver at Utah back in
Yes,
the
he was.
97, 98, the cross-white years.
Mhm.
And so, because I was wondering, I'm like, why did he choose Utah? There it is. So it's, his father had played here, and I love the potential there. I can't wait to see what he's probably the number one guy I'm most interested to see what he does in the spring. That's my
Yeah.
guy right there, Jackson Jones.
He has incredible potential and really optimistic and looking forward to seeing what he contributes. So we go from one position, to my opinion, that has tremendous depth to arguably maybe the biggest unknown on Utah's entire roster, the defensive tackle group. This is a group, and look, Utah has a history of producing elite defensive tackle talent. They lose players and they always regroup and do well. I cannot remember an offseason where you lose your top 3 guys in snaps played. Like Aliki Vaimaki, Samote Pepa, if we're going to want to split hairs of who's better there, sure. But Pepa's a beast. There's a reason Washington brought him in. He was a mauler against the run. And then the combination of Tanu Vasa and Junior Tafuna, one of the best defensive tackle combinations. And unfortunately, as we already talked about, now Utah has to reckon with Tanu Vasa, and I do think he's going to have a good year over with the Cougars too. So I'm looking at this defensive tackle group, and I mentioned Vaimaki, the veteran, is the guy I'm looking at. He should definitely be a starter. He's always been someone who's willing to do what Utah asked their defensive tackles to do. Take on the double teams, do the dirty work, free up the other guys. Dallas Vakalaki is an ideal 3-tech. He had 2 sacks last year as a freshman, now a full offseason in training too. I think he's going to explode. So who's the next guy I'm really looking at? That's a Jonah Laea. I think that is a guy that even I think Morgan Scalley mentioned at one point too. He seems like he has the potential. He's been waiting behind some of the best guys, so hopefully he can step up. But compared to, yes, have all those transfer guys necessarily played? No, but they played some and produced a little bit. There's just a lot of unknowns and a lot of lack of experience outside of those top 2 guys. And even Vakalaki was a reserve last year, Matt. So this group has some massive questions they need to answer in spring ball.
Well, and they get beat up. I mean, especially in the Big 12, where the emphasis is so much more on the running game. They get beat up, and Utah's done so well because they can rotate guys. So depth is so important there at the defensive tackle. And I was kind of looking at behind those 3, because those 3 that you mentioned, Vimahi, Vakalahi, and Laea, those were the ones that Scally mentioned as kind of the guys that are there at D tackle. And Laea apparently finally got the weight needed that he's been trying to get. But after that, I was like, well, you have Jory Benson. He was the 23 scout team player of the year, but didn't play at all last season.
Yeah.
You got a couple high school freshmen that joined in the spring. You got Carson Kafusi and Sione Motuapuaka. So you got two guys there, but again, like if Scally's concerned about guys having the right weight, I don't think either of those guys are quite there yet. So I kind of still look at this as a position that they have to. I have to think that they're going to be grabbing a guy after the spring transfer portal. I just think I can't see them entering into the regular season with just those 3 and then a whole lot of unknowns.
I agree, but it does Utah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. Is there a defensive tackle they've grabbed out of the transfer portal ever? They've grabbed DNs. We've talked about a couple of years ago. Oh, what was Karene Reed's brother? Gabry. When Gabry came over, that was a big get. Edge linebacker hybrid, Mahmoud Diabate. And we just talked about all the transfer defensive ends added. I can't remember a defensive tackle they added. Morgan Scalley has already talked about the depth they have too. So I agree that they should. I'm not sure they will. Will Utah be fine at defensive tackle? I believe they will. I do expect, though, there's definitely a chance this defense takes a step back. Now, thankfully, the offense is going to take a major leap forward to me.
Yeah.
But when you lose guys, this even goes beyond the defensive tackle conversation. Junior Tafuna's gone. We already talked about some of the defensive ends you lose. You lose Karene Reed, who's a tremendous leader. Zamiah Vaughn is gone as well. And now you lose a Cameron Calhoun as well. There's a lot of unknowns in the cornerback room. I actually am expecting the Utah defense to take a little bit of a step back. Still a top 3 to 5 unit in the conference. Yes, but I'm not expecting Utah to have the best defense in the Big 12 this year. Could they? Absolutely. It's Morgan Scalley. But just looking at this on paper, it doesn't inspire best defense there. Still a good defense. Yeah, it's a Utah defense, but there is a lot of questions, Matt, and the defensive line is one of the biggest still.
Well, you bring up such a good point too, that they didn't appear to be scrambling in the last transfer portal. It didn't appear that they were saying, oh, we have to go out and get some guys really anywhere on defense other than corner. They were really trying to bring in some corners. But so I guess you're right. I mean, I guess we'll find out. That's the nice thing. In a couple of weeks, we should get a little bit of a glimpse into, why they didn't go after any. There must be some guys that are stepping up, and we're just not aware of them yet. And there's been a lot of, like you said, there's been a lot of guys that before the season starts, you don't even know their name, and all of a sudden they're out there making big plays for the Utes because that's what they do. They develop players.
The other position they really don't do this with is interior offensive lineman. They added the big transfer from USC, but that guy's 6'7". I'm not sure I know Mekhi Becton just played guard for the Philadelphia Eagles at that height, but that's a little different with Beckman's a fantastic athlete. I have and last year I had questions about the interior of the offensive line, and I did not always think they performed up to standard. So that's where I'm curious to see how will the defensive tackle group age. Will it be a year by a group that this time next year will be like, I really wish Utah would have added a veteran. So it's fascinating to see what they can do. But this defensive line still has the potential to be a really strong unit. There are just a lot of unknowns. I mean, the player, we feel the best about is maybe Vaimahi, just in terms of the overall consistency of his career. And that's a career reserve still. You could, I've mentioned, argued Fano, but even he would have his ups and downs last year. So a lot to be figured out with this Utah defensive line group. And spring ball, little over, actually at the time we're recording this, it's 10 days away from the very first practice that we'll be able to see live, which is incredibly exciting. And we're going to continue to monitor the football team's progress. But I want to talk about the basketball team, because not just the men's team. We talked a lot about Alex Jensen on the show, but the current Utah men's basketball team is still competing right now. Women's basketball team lost in the tournament. We'll talk about that too, and what to expect moving forward from both programs in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Roy. Roy has you covered for all things supporting your favorite athletes in the NIL world. Attention Locked On Utes fans, ever wished you could directly support your favorite Utah athletes and be part of their journey? Now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players you love. Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes that you are representing with Utah. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight from the athletes you back. The part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite Utah players directly and help shape the future of Utah sports with Roy. You can download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Utah athletes the way they deserve. With transparency, trust, and real impact, this is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Make sure you head over to Roy today and help support the Utah athletes in their quest to bring this team Big 12 championships. Matt, looking at the Utah basketball season, this is a team, they're going to be the 11th seed in the conference tournament coming up. We'll talk about the women's team and what happened with them shortly, but I'm excited to see how they're going to perform. It's a game they're going to be facing off against UCF, the game they lost that Craig Smith, of course, was dismissed after two. It was a very narrow loss as well. I want to give all the credit in the world to the Utah basketball players and coaches. I really did not like how Utah moved on from Craig Smith just after two massive wins. I wish they waited till the end of the season. Did they get the right guy in Alex Jensen? Yes. I just believe that Craig Smith earned the right to finish out the year. But despite them moving on from Coach Smith, this team has never quit. They were up on BYU early, and I know they lost that game, but I was impressed by their fight, just like I was against West Virginia too. This is not a team that's going to go out quietly against UCF. Honestly, Matt, if I had to predict, I actually think Utah is going to pull this off. I think this group's going to come together for one last victory. Yes, the Knights are a strong team. They got some really good individual players, but I like a lot of things about Utah right now. Even a loss in BYU, that's a top 25 team on the road, and you fought really well. I think this Utah team is going to win this first game in this tournament.
I agree. I do. I mean, considering they were tied up, I think it was 11 seconds left in the game on the road against UCF.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to see him pull that one off, but I think they match up well with UCF. I like that a lot. They have nothing to lose, which is often a good thing for a team. You've got some seniors there. The Utes, they live and die by the way that Gabe Madsen shoots that three. If he's off, it's over. If he's off, game over. They lose when he goes 1 for 9. But if he's on, they can beat anybody. They really can. And so I feel like they'll get that UCF win. I think it's unfortunate that they drew Kansas there for the next round, basically a home game for them. And Kansas, it's nice that Kansas is down this year, somewhat down for Kansas, but because they're 6-7 in their last 13, but only one of those losses came at home against Texas
Mhm.
Tech. So, but you're right. It's not exact. They're not in the Allen Field house. It's about an hour or so to
Yeah,
Kansas City. So
it's not far.
maybe there. I mean, of the four teams that are in that next round, Kansas is probably the most beatable.
Yeah, I feel like they are. I think that you have a chance there, but it's going to be incredibly hard for all the reasons we discussed of what a prominent Jayhawks program. Hunter Dickinson dropped over 30 the other
Oh
day
yeah.
too. So this is when it gets real for the Jayhawks, and I think they know it too, and they'll
Yep.
definitely want to get revenge. But either way, hopefully Utah could just get it done against UCF later tonight. The Utah women's basketball team, though, unfortunately not able to get it done against Texas Tech. That was one Texas Tech won 75-64, including the second quarter was 21-10 in favor of the Lady Raiders. And it just got out of hand basically from there. Credit Maupin for the 22-point performance that she poured in. Gianna Neepkins continues to produce for this Utah squad as she's done all year with 23, but just not quite good enough. Vieira, only 1 point. Even Jenna Johnson, 9 is good. Fine. Kennedy Queen, only 2 points as well. They frustrated her throughout the game. In Utah, they turned it over 15 times in the game too. I know Texas Tech scored 17 too, but anytime you have over 15 turnovers, you're going to put yourself in a poor position here. So a tough loss for Utah, but Gavin Peterson's done a good job with this team. Utah's resume is still good enough. I absolutely expect them to be in the NCAA tournament when it comes out too. And there's still enough talent on this team, especially with Gianna Neepkins, where they're going to have a chance to upset some teams. I don't think they're going to make a run like they did a couple years ago where they nearly beat that LSU team
Yeah.
that ended up winning it all. But I do think this is a team that can make some noise in the field.
Yeah, I hope they do. I hope
Mhm.
that they can at least get one or two because that was a really disappointing loss.
It was. It
And
was.
Texas Tech, they just got hot for a minute. They did. I mean,
Mhm.
they almost even knocked off Oklahoma State. It was close.
Mhm.
So yeah, they just caught a hot team at the wrong time, and now they need to go in and focus, and hopefully they get an 8 or 9 seed is kind of where it looks like the projections are putting them, and that should give them a good opportunity in the first game. The second game is going to be pretty tough, but
Mhm.
hopefully, this group can come together. They've got some great seniors, and I'd love to see them get another win.
I would too. Jenna Johnson, Gianna Neepkins have meant so much. They have been a part of the turnaround for the Utah
Yeah,
women's basketball
that's
program.
kind of
So
what started it.
would love to see them finish it out strong this year. And I do expect once again for them to be involved in the field. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Utes. Matt, always great having you on. Where can people head over to check out more of your content?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on at utah.rivals.com. We're excited for spring ball to get going, so we'll get a lot of content in there soon.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We can't wait for it as well. Make sure you keep it at Locked On Utes for all the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics. And we hope to see you again on tomorrow's show.